Have you ever stopped to think about what makes you, well, you? Not just your personality, but how you understand the world. Today, we're diving deep into three really fundamental human things: music, language, and mathematics. They shape our thoughts, our culture, even who we are. And we're going to explore this surprising kind of symbiotic relationship they have. Yeah, you might not have thought about them quite this way before. Our deep dive today comes from a really compelling academic article looking at consistency and abstraction, specifically in how music, language, and math relate. It draws on philosophy, cognitive science, math itself. It really challenges how we usually see these things. Our mission really is to unpack how these fields, which seem so separate, are actually deeply connected, and how each one has sort of specialized to do unique things, vital things. And what that tells us about, the richness, but also the limits of how humans express themselves. We often think of them as separate subjects, right? Different classes in school. But this work argues for a deep interdependence, like a fundamental dance between them. Imagine them as these core pillars supporting how we think, each one holding up the others. Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. The source starts right off by drawing a key distinction, what each of these three primarily communicates.
Yeah, and what's fascinating is how it defines their core jobs, their kind of superpowers. So language, it's incredibly knightable, right? Rich with symbols. And its goal is to capture basically the whole of objective human experience. It lets us abstract things, categorize them, and really importantly, name concepts. Then you have mathematics. It sort of emerges as this logical specialization from language. It rigorously models the quantitative side of reality. It deals with what the source calls quanta, these discrete measurable bits.
Yeah.
A bit like Max Planck's idea for energy.
Okay, so language gives us the sort of objective world map, and math gives us the rulers and scales to measure it precisely. But where does music fit in all this? What's its unique role in this trio?
Music. It's presented as the expressive foundation. Actually, maybe something that comes before language and math and how we develop cognitively. It's all about subjective sonic communication. It expresses the things that you can't really formalize. The source calls it the ineffable subjective, or like the philosopher C.I. Lewis talked about qualia.
Qualia, like the actual feeling of seeing red or the taste of coffee, that kind of thing.
Exactly, those raw subjective sensations. You experience them intensely maybe, but you can't fully describe them in words or measure them or put the feeling into a formula. Music taps right into that, the ineffable. It's almost like the stage where the drama of language and the precision of math happen.
That's a really powerful way to frame it. So language for the what, the objective descriptions, math for the how, the mechanics, the measurements, and music for the why, that deep underlying impulse, the raw feeling you can't quite quantify. But is it always harmonious, this division of labor, or do they sometimes, step on each other's toes, like language trying to nail down a musical feeling?
Well, maybe less of a clash and more of a deliberate specialization that actually creates a symbiosis. The article really stresses this isn't a hierarchy, like one is better. It's more about profound interdependence. Each gives us a unique, absolutely essential lens for interacting with reality. They have their own power, their own purpose, but they're tangled together, filling in the gaps for each other.
Right. Okay. So let's dig into that interaction more. How do these distinct roles actually reinforce each other in practice?
Well, the dependence is huge. Take mathematics. It relies so heavily on language. I mean, without language, how would you even conceive of abstract ideas like number, set, function, or something like infinity? It's really difficult to imagine. Language gives us the basic building blocks for logic and for quantifying things. Words like all, some, and, or. These are for fundamentally linguistic, right? But they're absolutely essential for math statement, for proofs.
So mathematical notation itself. All the symbols plus minus equals. It's basically a specialized language, like a super efficient shorthand built for precision.
Precisely. It is a language.
Yeah.
Designed for conciseness, its own grammar, its own vocabulary. But it absolutely still depends on our grasp of natural language to interpret it, to use it. The source also points out how math serves music as an organizing principle. This goes way back, Pythagoras and the harmonic series. But it stretches to modern stuff too, like using set theory in compositions. Think Milton Babbitt. Set theory in music lets composers arrange pitches, rhythms, in really systematic ways, using math to create new structures, new sounds.
That quote you mentioned about Babbitt saying math is like a second language for a composer, that really hits home. Though I wonder, is that view widespread in music? Or is it more for, specific, maybe academic styles?
Oh, it's definitely more specialized, particularly in academic circles or, say, avant-garde music. But it undeniably shows that deep, practical link. And then, conversely, think about language as prosody, The rhythm, the intonation, the melody of speech, that non-semantic part, they're actually very close to musical communication. It lets language handle ambiguity, nuance. It's what makes poetry work.
Right.
So you get this strong feedback loop. Each one influences and kind of enriches the others.
Okay, let's rewind a bit then. Where did these three amazing forms of expression even come from? What's the origin story here?
Yeah, the article gets into some fascinating ideas about their evolution. Music, for instance, seems to be the most primordial. It's argued it came before language and math, maybe descending from a kind of proto-language.
Proto-language.
Yeah, like an early communication system, before Homo sapiens, even maybe 300,000 years ago. Combining sounds, gestures, rhythm. Stephen Mithen's theory is mentioned here, suggesting music was a core part of how early humans, or even pre-humans, communicated.
Wow, a proto-language of music. That's incredible. And didn't the source mention an indigenous group in the Amazon? The Pararans?
Yes, exactly. Their language uses chants, shouts, and this amazing vocabulary of whistles. It's very close to musical expression. Imagine like a specific whistle pattern meaning not just an emotion, but jaguar nearby or meat by the river, conveying meaning purely through pitch and rhythm changes.
That's fascinating.
It suggests music taps into our limbic system, our expressive understanding, maybe bypassing pure logic initially. And there's this subtle but really important distinction the source makes. Music, in its primal form, appeals to our morality.
Morality, how so?
Like that gut feeling, intuitive, often communal sense of right and wrong, maybe rooted in ancient group cohesion needs. Whereas language, because it can articulate rules, reason things out, formalize principles, it appeals more to our ethics.
So the structured, thought-out code of how we should act.
Exactly. It's like the difference between a felt sense of good and a reasoned code of conduct. Music hits that felt sense.
Okay, so music.
Yeah.
Ancient, emotional, tied to our core, maybe even our morality. What about math then?
Math comes much, much later. A specialization of language really arising maybe 12,000 years ago. And this timing isn't accidental. It lines up with humans shifting away from hunter-gatherer life towards agriculture, keeping animals. This new lifestyle created this critical need for better counting, for abstract ways to track things. That drove math's development. And this really highlights how math distinguishes itself. It does so by essentially abandoning qualia.
Abandoning the subjective feel.
Right. Qualitatively, one sheep is unique, isn't it? But for math, one has to equal one. You sacrifice that individual richness. But that's what allows for precise counting, for abstraction. It's a trade-off for power.
Okay, this next point really made me rethink things. Math is all about absolute precision, right? Consistency, no contradictions allowed. But the source suggests this very strength, this pursuit of consistency, comes at a price.
It does raise a huge question. What happens when consistency is your absolute top priority? Math rigorously avoids contradictions. Think about a simple equation like x plus 1. Syntactically, it looks okay, but try to solve it with standard algebra.
You can't, right? You end up with something impossible, like 0 is 1.
Exactly, a contradiction. It shows the impossibility of a solution within those rules. So mathematics, in its drive for total consistency, actually becomes incomplete. It can't represent the full complexity, the often contradictory nature of reality itself.
So for math, hitting an inconsistency is like a brick wall. It means something's wrong or unsolvable in that system, but language seems to handle it totally differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Language kind of embraces inconsistency, doesn't it? Think of a phrase like, the green color sleeps loudly. Semantically, literally, it's nonsense. But language just rolls with it. We find metaphorical meaning, poetic meaning. It can give meaning to those inconsistencies, turn them into poetry, humor, deep metaphors. And that makes language complete in a different way. It can express the huge range of human experience, even when it's contradictory.
That's so true. It reminds me of how kids talk sometimes, like a fuzzy thought or a loud color. It makes perfect sense in their world, even if it breaks logical rules. Language just absorbs that.
It does. And music. It's described as aesthetically complete. The source mentions a tonalism. You know, that 20th century style that deliberately avoids traditional keys, uses all 12 notes more freely.
Right, Schoenberg and that whole movement.
Exactly. Tonalism brought sounds and combinations that were previously considered dissonant, jarring maybe, right into the realm of musical aesthetics. Accepted sounds. It reflects complex cognitive processes, sure, but it allowed music to expand, to express new things, create new sound worlds, new meanings. So music doesn't really suffer from aesthetic inconsistencies in the way math hits logical ones. It just absorbs them, expands its palette.
This really brings Gödel's incompleteness theorems to mind, which the source mentions too.
Indeed. Gödel famously showed that any formal system, if it's powerful enough to do basic arithmetic, will either contain true statements it can't prove within its own rules.
Or it'll contain inconsistencies.
Right. That limitation is baked into formal systems like math. But it doesn't really apply to language or music in the same way. They aren't bound by those same strict consistency rules. Language handles inconsistency through interpretation, and music kind of transcends it aesthetically. They achieve a different kind of completeness.
Okay, so we've seen math hit a wall with inconsistency due to its need for logical purity, while language and music kind of thrive on ambiguity and apparent contradictions. But what about when math itself tries to grapple with uncertainty? That brings us to probability. It's rigorous math, yet the source suggests it can feel almost metaphorical. How does that work?
Yeah, it's a really fascinating point. Probability theory is a rigorous mathematical system. Axioms, theorems, the whole deal. It quantifies chance. What the philosopher Peirce called tykism, the idea that there's real randomness, not just everything being determined.
Yeah.
But the metaphorical feeling creeps in when we try to interpret what those probabilities actually mean out here in the real world.
Like the classic 70% chance of rain forecast.
Yeah.
Exactly like that. That 70% isn't some literal truth about exactly what will happen. It's a number quantifying our uncertainty based on the weather models we have. And there are different ways to even think about that 70%. A frequentist might say, if you could repeat this exact day infinite times, it would rain 70% of those times. A Bayesian might see it more as a degree of belief that gets updated as new data comes in.
Okay. So the math is precise, but what it means depends on your interpretive framework.
Precisely. The interpretation is limited by the assumptions you make, like assuming a coin is fair when calculating odds. So while the model is mathematical, applying it involves interpretation, acknowledging uncertainty.
So it's like a bridge. It's a precise model, but its real-world meaning is more like an approximation, representing our state of knowledge, which feels a bit like how a metaphor works, or how we interpret music. That's a great way to put it. Just like a metaphor works within a certain conceptual frame, or a piece of music invites interpretation within its structure, a probability result is only really meaningful within the context of its assumptions. It's a tool for reasoning about the unknown. And the unknown always involves some ambiguity, some interpretation that links it back, interestingly, to the interpretive nature of art, of music.
Wow. Okay, so wrapping this up, what does this all mean for us? For people just trying to understand the world, we started seeing these three, music, language, math, as separate things, but now they feel incredibly tangled together, like a braid.
Yeah, this deep dive really shows they aren't just tools we use. They're interconnected systems that fundamentally shape how we think, who we are. Mathematics gives us that amazing precision, the logical framework for quantity. Language provides the incredible breadth to express everything objective, subjective, even the messy inconsistencies. And music, maybe the oldest, connects us right back to that ineffable why, that deep, expressive pulse behind it all.
It really is a symbiotic relationship, isn't it? Each one empowers the others, helps them refine themselves, and together they expand our grasp of reality in really profound ways. You can't fully get one, it seems, without seeing its ties to the others. So here's a final thought as you go about your day. Maybe you're listening to music, maybe choosing your words carefully, maybe even just balancing your budget. Consider this. Given their unique powers, but also their inherent limits, which aspect of reality are you focusing on when you engage with music or language or math? And perhaps more interestingly, what might you be inadvertently leaving out?